You've been watching live images from the White House and a first ever face-to-face encounter between the German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the U.S. President Donald Trump. So much to say about what we just saw. We're doing so in the company of our World This Week panel, the World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast. We say hello to Aaron Zaleski. Listening in as well attentively was James McCauley, Paris correspondent for The Washington Post, Arthur Macmillan, journalist for the French news agency AFP, and Georg Blume, France correspondent for German weekly dissect. Welcome to the show. Let me begin with you. Did I hear right that remark at the end when they asked him about wiretapping? He turns to Angela Merkel and says something that you know full well about. It's something you can relate to.
Yes, and I think...
what did he mean exactly?
Well, that both were wiretaped by the same U.S. government, I think. And this story is still very in every German's ear, you know, that when Merkel was wiretaped by the NSA, I think it was 1912, 1913, when that came out, it became a big scandal in Germany where German-American relations were put into doubt for the first time, and that there's no confidence between our nations anymore. So Merkel made it a very serious issue at that time. And it's very, of course, intelligent tonight to make it a common topic now. But between, if Trump wanted to please Merkel, I mean, he's done well. And Merkel tonight was in a situation where she had to show her differences with this new American president.
Yeah, and at one point she schools him a little bit because he talked about negotiators for Germany have done a better, she's talking about trade, have done a better job than those of the United States. Yeah. She said bilateral agreements are between the European Union and the United States, not between Germany and the United States.
That was Professor Merkel, right? Who teaches the American president who doesn't know about trade politics. But it's a dangerous thing because, you know, people don't really care, also in Germany, who makes all these negotiations. And
James McCauley, what's going to be the headline in the U.S. press tomorrow when from coming out of that press conference, the big takeaway?
I don't know. I mean, it seems like one thing he said early on in his remarks was that there would be some kind of agreement on the other side to up defense spending and all of that, and we don't know the details just yet. But if confirmed, that would be a very big story, and in line with rhetoric we're seeing from candidates here like Macron, who in his kind of platform that he unveiled a few weeks ago pledged to do something similar. But then, of course, the mechanics of how this sort of nascent sort of EU independent defense body would work remain unclear. But that seems to be a big...
And did I hear right? Did he again reiterate that claim that he'd been wiretapped at Trump Tower?
He did indeed, by the Obama administration.
All right. Arthur Macmillan, let me ask you about the tone. And it's not often you hear a U.S. president say, and I quote here, "Workers are screwed, and that's the reason I'm here today." Pardon the language. Those are the words of the U.S. president.
Yeah, I think we can agree that the thing we're never short of is things to talk about after Donald Trump has spoke. But what we might be short about, if we want to take the matters forward, are details. He just says things are great, it's going to be great. There is no detail. But what really came out in that press conference, if you're looking for something new to write about, you'd really not have anything to write about. I mean, he mentioned trade, he mentioned NATO, but probably tomorrow what they're going to go on is him again repeating that wiretapping claim. Because despite every entity in the US government system and the intelligence system saying this did not happen, Donald Trump continues to say that it happened. Today we have had an unprecedented repudiation of Trump's claim, or his spokesman's claim yesterday, that he was wiretapped. And despite that, he just continues as if it didn't happen. I think what we're seeing again, and it didn't come through as clearly today perhaps as it did with Theresa May when Theresa May visited the United States, but Trump doesn't really speak to the United States or the world. He only really speaks to his base, and that's why he uses expressions like the workers have been screwed or are being screwed, because he wants his voters to hear him talking for them. And that's what's unprecedented in this US administration. He's speaking for the people who supported him, not the other 50, 60, 70% of the country.
All right. We saw a handshake at the end of that press conference. We didn't see one at the beginning when there was that traditional photo opportunity inside of the Oval Office. And listen carefully over the click of the cameras to what they say, the two leaders.
Handshake. 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 Handshake.
In view of that, Aaron Zaleski, how do you think the press conference went?
Well, if that was the beginning of it, it certainly had an awkward start. I mean, it's no secret that there's been tension between Trump and Merkel. I mean, on the campaign trail, he did accuse her of ruining Germany on her refugee stance. So it was sort of expected that there was going to be a certain amount of tension. I think during the actual conference, I think the goal of this was to find a common ground. I think during the actual conference, the tone was much different than it has been in the past.
Final point on this, Georg Blume, she came and when she talked about the European Union's the one who does the negotiation, yes. She really came as the leader of Europe.
Exactly. And did she really, get that point across? I'm not so sure. She was expected to be our voice, our European voice, standing up to this US president who's putting everything in question we believe in. And did she do the job there? I'm not so sure. But because we know her. She is such a diplomatic person. She is such a understanding person. And she is in a new role there too.
I'm guessing she's never had an easier press conference to deal with than that one.
Or a more difficult one.
For her home audience, I think it's difficult.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of, the questions that are being batted around, as François said, she schooled Donald Trump. He doesn't know who does the negotiations for European trade deals with the United States.
But who cares who does it?
But he speaks
who cares? He's white Trump. Nobody cares who does these negotiations.
He speaks in such generalities.
But who is the winner of this press conference? And I'm not sure so it's Merkel.
Well, I think it mainly just, they have very different personalities and very different approaches to diplomacy, if you can even call Trump's approach to diplomacy. And I think that was really highlighted here. Merkel has always been very cautious, very pragmatic, very analytical. Trump just sort of speaks from the hip, not very diplomatic at all, hence the term about workers being screwed. So I think this just really underscored the difference in their approach to diplomacy and in their personalities.
I mean, he was asked about the tweets, do you regret them? And he said very seldom. I mean, again, he's not really going to change, I don't think.
No. And there were those assertions that we saw during the press conference about quote-unquote fake news. And on that score, by the way, earlier this week on Tuesday, the German government presenting a draft law that would impose fines of up to 50 million euros, on social networks that fail to delete hate speech or fake news.
With regard to a company like Twitter, which deletes only 1% of the illegal content flagged by users, it would appear that the complaint management does not exist or is not working. Whereas with regard to a company like Google with its YouTube platform, where 90% of all illegal content is deleted very quickly, it appears the complaint management system is working, and then it must be decided on an individual basis if the fines will be imposed anyway.
Two interesting remarks on that, and I'll put it to you first, Georg Blume. First of all, obviously this is in the run-up to the German elections, which are taking place in September. There's that rising Eurosceptic party. There have been bots and internet armies that may or may not be close to the Kremlin. So that's one aspect of it. But all the companies that he names, well, those are U.S. companies. And there is this sense that the U.S. owns the internet, and that's weighs heavy on the conversation when Angela Merkel is sitting with Donald Trump at the White House.
No. I think there is some anti-American propaganda in this law for the campaign in Germany. You know, our government is split on this law. We have the economic minister who says, when you're doing this, you're making internet companies going away from Germany, and it can be very bad for the German economy. This law is not made yet. It's only coming from the Justice Ministry so far, and there's a big debate about it. So. But on the other hand, we have that feeling, indeed, nobody should interfere in our election campaign, and the government should be strong in doing something against what has happened in the United States.
The populist winning streak was, by the way, snapped this week. The Netherlands celebrating the highest turnout in a general election in decades. 81% came to vote. They have stalled or reversed, depending on how you look at it, the fortunes of the far right's Geert Wilders. True, his PVV party gains 5 seats, but it's off the predicted historic highs. And the man who has the words "Stop Islam" scrimming in bold letters across his Twitter account page won't be a factor in forming the next Dutch government. In his victory speech, the Dutch Prime Minister, who, by the way, like Merkel's, proven to be a survivor, weathering the Euro crisis, the migrant influx, Brexit, since coming to power in 2010. Mark Rutte proving once again a survivor.
What an evening. I've already spoken with a range of European leaders, and it's also an evening where the Netherlands, after Brexit, after the US elections, said stop to the wrong kind of populism.
The wrong kind of populism. James McCauley, we discussed this with a panel of Dutch journalists last night on this very set. What do you think when you hear him talk about the wrong kind of populism?
Well, I think it's clear that he's hoping that the outcome of the Dutch election will be some kind of stopgap to this kind of trend that we have seen in Europe for so long, and that we have been that commentators have been wringing their hands about, especially after the victory of Donald Trump in the November election in the U.S. That people like Marine Le Pen, the AfD in Germany, will somehow come into power. Now. It's true that there was the Austrian election before the Dutch election, and now there's the Dutch election. And so in not every case where there has been a populist party in the arena, it has come into power, as the most cynical among us were concerned that it would. However, I think it's also important to point out that the particular political identity and dynamics of the Netherlands are unique and distinct, and that the truth is, coming up on the French election in just a little bit over a month, we really don't have any sense how this relates or not.
All right, but here's an interesting point.
What's going to happen here?
Back in January, Rutte's party taking out a full-page ad in the newspaper Die Volkskrant telling citizens, act normal or go away. And there has been the sense the last couple of days that yes, they managed to thwart the far right, but they've taken a lot of the far right's ideas on board.
Yes, and this notion, like, go away, at least from a French perspective, I mean, whether or not the National Front triumphs in the second round of the election, the current poll numbers suggest that approximately 40% of the voters will support Marine Le Pen. So that is a extremely sizable block of the population that is not going anywhere, no matter who rolls into the Élysée. So I'm not really sure that that the particular outcomes of the particular contests that lie ahead really tell us much about the future of populism in Europe. I mean, it very well may be here to stay.
But we're seeing it, for instance, this week, Aaron Zaleski, with a debate over a new law that forces people to speak French on construction worker sites. And there is this sense that a lot of these ideas have gone mainstream.
There is. And I think that Marine Le Pen is sort of riding the wave of that. I mean, a lot of the main platform in her campaign, it's no longer the blatant racism or anti-Semitism that has been associated with the party in the past. It's more of this nationalism and Frenchness. And the outside forces such as immigration in the EU are a threat to this Frenchness. And she's throwing around the phrase patriots versus globalists. So globalists being the enemy and then patriots being the French.
I think what's come out of that election, first of all, is that perhaps the nightmare did not come true, but the man who is in the dream has been boosted because his seats have gone up. Those ideas have not gone away. You're absolutely right. For example, the translation on the message in that advert, a lot of people translated it as "or leave," which has a very different connotation, just as "go away." It's a bit harder. And we have Marine Le Pen straight after the election saying that what Mr. Wilders' gain in seats has shown is that the ideas that the far right in France are projecting have popularity, and he's speaking like us. So I think it's very important to point out that while the dynamics of the Netherlands are significantly different from France, what we've seen in France is that the traditional right and left have basically collapsed, and there is this gap into which Le Pen and some other candidates have walked. But what we will see for the next month is the fact that Marine Le Pen is centre stage, and I would not in any way be complacent about how the far right will
All right, cartoonist Paresh Nath in the Gulf newspaper, the College Times, offered up a view of the Netherlands election that included a reference to the tale of the Dutch boy who saved Holland by stopping a leak with his finger in the dam. The EU in that cartoon saying, "Bravo, little Dutch boy." It may be cheering, but do you agree? When you see those pro-European leaders, are they cheering too soon, Georg?
I think there is one very positive message from the Netherlands, and that is economics works in this. Before it was told to us, the Netherlands have a very well-run economy, and they're still going for populism. That economic success doesn't count anymore in countering populism, and that is not proven to be not true. You cannot compare with France, right? France doesn't have the same economic success like the Netherlands have in the last years. But I think economic success still counts in the populist debate, and that's very important to know.
All right, economics will be a big factor, but the French election's also been a lot about ethics. And the one-time frontrunner, François Fillon, embroiled in that parliamentary payroll scandal this week. He was placed under formal investigation. Now there's even a row over his tailor-made suits. If you ask him the question, he wants to move on. It's not easy, though.
This is a presidential campaign. The vote is in 39 days. From now on, you can ask my lawyer your legal questions. I will only answer questions related to my political program.
How is that going to work, Arthur Macmillan?
I don't think many voters like politicians who say you can only ask me, or journalists for that matter, who are addressed by a politician that says you can only ask me the questions I want you to ask. I mean, this is a candidate who stood up as Mr. Clean, and he has been, frankly, the dirtiest candidate that France has probably ever seen. And yet he is carrying on as if there's nothing to see here, please move on. And yet he's still in the race, and he's still he's still the conservative right candidate. James
Macaulay, how do you explain that?
I don't know. Well, I think there's certainly a lot of fantastic theater for all of the journalists. I mean, I think all of us would kind of love a more detailed accounting of the suits in question. Be great to see that. As regards his refusal to step out of the race, it really has. It has kind of created a situation that makes a Le Pen victory more imaginable, because, as is sort of widely known, he is the center-right candidate who, in much the same way that you mentioned in the Dutch example, who in the course of the campaign had espoused hard lines that were meant to sort of attract the more intense conservative voters traditionally associated with the Front National camp, and now where are those voters going to go? And they're not likely to go for Macron, it doesn't seem. So this is creating a situation that makes the once unthinkable thinkable, more than thinkable.
The bandwagon may have stopped this week in the Netherlands, but the question is it going to restart?
All right, we're a little bit short for time this week because we were pushed by that Donald Trump press conference. We didn't get a chance to talk about Nicola Sturgeon deciding on a second.
I'm very sorry about that.
Scotland referendum, but I got to ask you a question because we were talking about the Netherlands, right? They have 17 million citizens, nearly 3 times more than the whole of Ireland. Even though the Dutch founded New York City, today being March 17th, there's no celebration to match that of St. Patrick's Day, where there's a big parade. That's true in cities across the United States, not just in New York. There you see the scene outside of St. Patrick's Cathedral on Fifth Avenue, not far from Trump Tower. And you know that the celebration's gone global when Rio's famed Christ the Redeemer statue goes green for one night. And I have to put the question to the Scotsman in the room here because, let's face it, there isn't this kind of enthusiasm over Burns Night over the rest of the world, nor for that matter for St. David's Day, March the 1st for the Welsh.
We probably need better marketing.
How do you explain this phenomenon?
I think it's just another symptom of the desire to make money out of any concept, any day that can be marketed effectively. And yes, the green does travel very well, but I don't even drink Guinness, so I'm the wrong guy to ask.
Aaron
I think
Zaleski?
in the U.S., I mean, most people don't even know the origins of St. Patrick's Day. It's just an excuse to party.
To dye the river green.
Exactly.
Or can we expect St. Patrick's Day to come to Germany much?
I don't know. Drink beer, yes. Will always work.
Georg Blum, I want to thank James McCauley, Arthur McMillan, Aaron Zaleski. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.